Beatrice Whitfield, spent most of my career championing wildlife habitats and ecological balance. Serving as the chief of wildlife conservation for our state, I oversaw everything from protecting endangered species to ensuring vital wetlands remained intact. After years of commuting from a cramped city loft, I longed for a quieter home, somewhere with greenery, a sense of neighborly calm, and maybe even some local wildlife to appreciate. Lakeshore Grove seemed like a dream come true. Tucked alongside a network of small lakes and lush wetlands, the neighborhood boasted scenic trails and wide streets lined with oak trees. The real estate listing promised a well-run HOA that maintained common areas. I figured that was a small trade-off for living among tranquil waters and vibrant bird life just beyond my doorstep. When I arrived, neighbors greeted me warmly enough. Still, I heard early whispers of an HOA board member, a middle-aged woman named Marcia Arnetti, or, as many privately refer to her, Karen. They said she wielded disproportionate influence, policing everything from mailbox colors to the exact length of one's lawn. I'd dealt with bureaucrats before, so I figured I could handle an overzealous HOA official. Little did I expect that her ambition would extend far beyond typical Karen meddling, all the way to illegally draining wetlands for personal gain. A few days after settling in, I took a leisurely walk around the neighborhood. The homes were large, with immaculate lawns, but the real charm for me lay past the tree line, where a meandering boardwalk led into a small wetland area. Signs read, "Community Wetland Preserve. Please enjoy responsibly." The HOA apparently set aside this patch of marshy land decades ago, ensuring a habitat for frogs, herons, and other native species. Strolling along the boardwalk, I marveled at the croaking chorus of amphibians, the fluttering of dragonflies, and glimpses of waterbirds wading in the reeds. This wetland might be modest, but it was teeming with life, a tiny oasis of biodiversity. My professional side lit up. What a rare gem to find in a suburban setting. Residents apparently used it for light walks, birdwatching, and educational tours for kids. Returning to my house, I mused how little the neighbors must realize its ecological significance. Many suburban wetlands are lost to development. The presence of this preserve signaled that, at some point, the HOA recognized nature's value. That gave me hope, though I'd soon learn that not all board members share that sentiment anymore. My first direct encounter with Marcia Karen Arnetti happened during an HOA gathering at the community clubhouse. I found a seat among neighbors who chatted about typical topics: landscaping standards, upcoming social events, minor property violations. Karen presided at the front, a tall woman in her early 50s with carefully coiffed hair and an unyielding demeanor. She eyed each speaker with a critical stare, dominating discussions with abrupt remarks. In a meeting, a neighbor raised concerns about litter on the wetlands boardwalk. Karen brushed it off. "We might eventually repurpose that marsh. The boardwalk is rarely used. Let's focus on areas that raise property values, not a mosquito-infested swamp." Her dismissive tone jarred me. Another board member, Ms. Temple, suggested the wetland was a unique asset. Karen snapped, "We'll see about that. Our community might have better uses for that land." I introduced myself briefly afterward, saying I'd moved in recently. Karen gave a perfunctory smile. "Welcome. We run a tight ship here. I expect you'll keep up appearances," she said. I nodded politely. She hurried off, ignoring any attempt at small talk. Something in her posture indicated she considered me just another resident to be monitored, not a potential ally. If only she knew I was an experienced ecologist with wide authority over wetland protections. Rumors soon emerged that Karen had big plans for improving the neighborhood, which apparently involved redeveloping useless marshy land. I heard from Ms. Temple that Karen was rumored to be in secret talks with a developer about turning the wetland preserve into a small commercial strip or high-end residences. The HOA might push to fill or drain the wetlands, presumably ignoring the habitat destruction that would entail. Alarm bells rang in my head. Our state had robust laws protecting wetlands. Typically, Draining them required extensive environmental impact studies and official permits from both state and federal agencies. If Karen tried to bypass that, she'd be in direct violation. Yet I'd seen cases where unscrupulous folks covertly pumped water out, manipulated drainage channels, and only revealed the land's transformation once it was too late for easy restoration. As an official with the Wildlife Conservation Department, I had the authority and moral duty to investigate. But I wanted to see if there was real evidence that Karen might attempt such a thing. Publicly, she downplayed the wetland as a mosquito pit. Ms. Temple confided that the board was split. Some recognized the preserve's environmental value, while Karen persuaded others it was a prime location for a community expansion. My fear, with her controlling approach, Karen might act unilaterally, ignoring legal constraints. So I quietly monitored the wetlands, occasionally taking notes on species and water levels. I had a gut feeling that the site's apparent lack of official classification might embolden Karen to do something rash. And sure enough, I wouldn't be waiting long. Early one morning, Ms. Temple phoned me in panic. She'd spotted a suspicious setup near the wetlands, hoses connected to an industrial pump, leading water away into the storm drain. A few workers in unmarked uniforms milled about. She approached them, but they refused to answer questions, referencing HOA instructions. Ms. Temple suspected Karen had hired them quietly. I hurried over. Indeed, the wetland's water level was already dropping by several inches. The pump's drone filled the air. This was no minor landscaping job. It was deliberate drainage. Waterfowl fluttered nervously around the receding pools. Turtles and amphibians appeared confused, some stranded in drying patches. My heart clenched at the ecological harm unfolding. I confronted the workers, who said Karen authorized them to remove stagnant water. Furious, I demanded they stop. They shrugged, saying only an official order from the HOA or local authorities could override Karen. Ms. Temple and I snapped photos as evidence, then retreated to figure out the next step. We recognized time was critical. If draining continued, the entire wetland could vanish within days, and the ecosystem might be irreversibly damaged. This was absolutely illegal. No environmental review, no state permit, no Army Corps of Engineers sign-off. As Chief of Wildlife Conservation, I had the power to halt such destructive acts, but I needed quick official backing. Ms. Temple offered to gather outraged neighbors. Meanwhile, I called my office's enforcement division, explaining the emergency, an HOA official illegally draining a wetland. They mobilized a state inspector to come at once. But we risked losing precious hours. The water was streaming out as we spoke. I found Karen later that day in the HOA clubhouse, rummaging through files. I confronted her directly. Why are there pumps in the wetlands? Have you authorized draining them? She gave me a condescending smirk. Yes, we're removing excess water. It's an eyesore and health hazard. The HOA has the right to manage our property. I pressed that a specialized permit was required to alter any wetland. She scoffed. It's not a real wetland, just a soggy patch. We can do what we see fit. Soon we'll have a better use for that land. Let me guess. You're one of those nature lovers who wants to breed mosquitoes. Her arrogance was palpable. I took a deep breath. I'm more than a nature lover, Ms. Arnetti. I happen to be the chief of wildlife conservation for this entire region. Draining a recognized wetland without proper clearance is a violation of both state and federal law. You must stop immediately. Karen's face twitched with surprise. That can't be. You can't just claim authority here. This is HOA property, private land. She stammered, then tried to maintain composure. We'll proceed as planned. You have no right to meddle in community affairs. She stormed out, ignoring my warnings. I dialed the state inspector, urging them to expedite. The draining continued unabated, each passing hour threatening irreversible harm to aquatic life. Back outside, a cluster of concerned neighbors, including Ms. Temple, demanded answers from the workers. Some tried to physically block the pumps, but the workers insisted they were just following orders. Tension soared. Ms. Temple told me the board was never consulted. Karen had done this unilaterally, presumably cutting a deal with a developer. The fiasco was happening so quickly, it felt like a deliberate strike. Get rid of the wetland before official channels could intervene. By late afternoon, help arrived. A state environmental enforcement team, along with a local police officer, pulled up. They confronted the workers, requesting permits or official documentation. The workers had none, just Karen's instructions. The enforcement officials explained that any fill or drainage of recognized wetlands required thorough review. Failure to comply carried heavy fines and potential criminal charges. They ordered the pumps shut off pending investigation. Karen appeared, outraged. She berated the officials. "This is private property. We can do as we want. Our neighborhood doesn't want a swamp." The lead inspector retorted that wetlands are protected due to their ecological function, even on private land. Karen raged about bureaucratic overreach, threatening lawsuits. The inspector calmly cited the relevant statutes, clarifying the severe penalties for illegal wetland destruction. At last, the pumps were turned off. The partial drainage had already lowered water levels drastically, leaving hundreds of frogs and fish stranded in shallow puddles. Some neighbors tried to rescue them, scooping them into deeper water. Ms. Temple wept at the destruction. Lush reeds lay exposed, some wildlife presumably dead or displaced. This was an ecological crime scene. The inspector taped up a notice, "Cease and desist, ongoing investigation." The police took statements, documenting Karen's role. She, still in denial, insisted they'd find no wrongdoing. But I provided photographic evidence from earlier that day. The inspector recognized me. "Chief Sinclair." "So you're the new resident?" he said, somewhat relieved to see me. I nodded, explaining the fiasco in detail. The inspector signaled that big legal trouble was looming for Karen if the wetlands were proven legitimate protected habitat. With the pumps shut down, the enforcement team assessed the site for damage. They found evidence that an entire corner of the wetland had been drained to near dryness, some amphibian egg masses destroyed, certain bird nesting areas upturned. The ground was soggy, half collapsed from forced water removal, leaving deep ruts. Experts worried about long-term harm to the wetland's ecosystem. Some species might not recover easily. For me, it was heartbreaking. Wetlands serve as crucial filters for water quality, habitats for diverse fauna, and flood buffers for surrounding land. This unscrupulous draining risked not just wildlife, but also potential flooding issues or property damage. My mind flashed with possible restoration steps: reflooding the area, replanting native reeds, maybe relocating wildlife. But that required time, resources, and a willingness from the community to rectify the harm. And the developer? Karen apparently was calling them to salvage the plan, ignoring the rising outcry from neighbors. Media interest spiked fast. Word of an illegal wetland draining by an HOA official was sensational enough. Once they discovered that I, a chief conservation officer, lived there and had confronted Karen, the story soared. Environmental groups denounced the sabotage, calling for criminal charges. The local news cameras filmed the drained patches, capturing images of volunteers trying to save stranded creatures. Ms. Temple gave an emotional on-camera statement about how callous the act was. Karen refused interviews, presumably hoping to spin her own narrative later. Meanwhile, the HOA board, blindsided by Karen's rogue actions, scrambled to distance themselves. Some members vowed that if she used HOA funds or made decisions alone, they might remove her from the board entirely. The fiasco became a meltdown on the community's online forum. Dozens demanded Karen's resignation, furious their neighborhood's name was now associated with an environmental scandal. Within a week, the State Enforcement Division concluded the wetlands were indeed under protective jurisdiction, based on topographical surveys and prior records. The developer who'd been eyeing the site quietly backed away, not wanting the PR nightmare or legal liability. The state announced a formal investigation into potential violations of the Clean Water Act, state wetland statutes, and local environment codes. They singled out Karen as the primary instigator. If found culpable, she could face massive fines or criminal charges. Karen, in a last-ditch effort, hired a lawyer who argued that the wetland was artificial or merely a drainage ditch. My enforcement colleagues rejected that claim, citing decades of maps and biological evidence. For me, as a high-ranking official, it was essential to keep the process transparent and fair. But there was no doubt, draining wetlands without a permit was a major offense, with no easy excuses. The culprit's arrogance had left a paper trail. At an emergency HOA session, members demanded Karen's explanation. She insisted she'd done it for the betterment of property values. Some supporters claimed the wetlands were mosquito-ridden. But the furious majority scorned her reckless gamble that threatened the neighborhood with legal and ecological fallout. Ms. Temple openly called for Karen's removal from the board and requested the HOA disclaim her personal liabilities so members wouldn't foot the bill for any fines. Sensing her crumbling support, Karen stormed out, vowing she'd fight back. Yet the tide was unstoppable. Local TV stations aired nightly segments showing the half-drained wetland, stranded wildlife, and outraged residents. The outcry built each day, culminating in demands for swift justice and a full restoration plan. Under mounting pressure, the State Environmental Agency, in coordination with the city attorney, filed a lawsuit against Karen individually, alleging illegal destruction of wetlands. The complaint included photographic evidence, worker testimonies, and historical maps. Meanwhile, activists launched petitions calling for the wetlands restoration. The story even reached national environmental organizations, which signaled their readiness to assist with funding or expertise to rehabilitate the site. Karen tried to spin it as government overreach and biased local politics, but she found few sympathizers. The developer, disclaiming involvement, provided phone records to investigators showing Karen had approached them, promising she could clear the land with minimal fuss. This further incriminated her. Meanwhile, the HOA board disavowed her claims that she acted on their behalf. Ms. Temple and others insisted the board never voted to drain the wetlands, nor had they allocated funds for that purpose. If Karen used any HOA resources, it was unauthorized. Public condemnation soared. My role as the chief of wildlife conservation amplified the fiasco, as national media found the storyline compelling. HOA official tries to drain wetlands, not realizing neighbor is top conservation officer. Editorials scorned Karen's ignorance and arrogance, praising me for stepping in. I insisted we focus on saving the wetland, but the scandal overshadowed everything else. The negativity took a toll on the neighborhood's collective morale. People felt betrayed by Karen's extremist approach, worried about potential liabilities or fines for the HOA. Ms. Parker, an elderly resident, confided that the fiasco gave the community a chance to unify in protecting local wildlife. She found small solace in that silver lining, even as she mourned the damage done. With the court's blessing, a preliminary injunction forced Karen to halt any further interference and barred any demolition or draining activities. The next step involved a restoration plan. The State Environmental Agency recommended appointing a specialized ecological firm to reflood the drained sections, replant native vegetation, and rescue or reintroduce displaced species. I offer my professional help, bridging my official role with local engagement. The plan was quickly drafted, repositioning water flow, removing the sabotage equipment, ensuring soil stability, and monitoring for disease or invasive species. Volunteers from the neighborhood pitched in. Ms. Temple organized weekend work parties to remove debris from the site, relay parts of the boardwalk, and create small wildlife safe zones. Children helped reseed aquatic plants. The local media captured heartwarming scenes of families working together to save their battered wetlands. Meanwhile, scientists checked water quality, ensuring it returned to a healthy equilibrium. Day by day, the marsh revived. Frogs croaked anew, birds returned to the partial wetlands, aquatic insects thrived. Karen, cut off from HOA leadership, was powerless to stop it. She faced depositions, forced to explain why she'd bypassed all environmental regulations. Rumor said her lawyer was negotiating a plea to reduce potential criminal fines. The developer was out of the picture entirely. Freed from her sabotage, the wetland displayed nature's resilience. Though full recovery might take years, the healing had begun. Eventually, Karen's case reached the county courthouse. Evidence was damning. Phone records, worker testimonies, the apparent instruction to pump out that swamp, overshadowing any claim of ignorance. The judge, citing state wetland protection laws and federal guidelines, handed down a stiff penalty. Karen was found liable for unlawful drainage of protected wetlands, faced enormous fines, and was ordered to pay restitution for the rehab costs. She also received a suspended jail sentence, with conditions that if she violated any further environmental laws, she'd face imprisonment. A hush fell in the courtroom as the verdict was read. Karen, once arrogant, stood pale, shoulders sagging. The press hammered her with questions outside, snapping photos as she tried to shield her face. She provided no statement, practically fleeing the scene. Her reign as an HOA tyrant was finished. The membership had already removed her from any position. She soon sold her house at a loss, skipping town in disgrace. Meanwhile, the neighborhood exhaled relief. The judge's ruling validated our cause, reaffirming that the wetlands deserve protection. Freed from Karen's destructive presence, the HOA embraced a new, more eco-conscious perspective. They recognized the wetlands as an asset, not a worthless hazard. In the months after the verdict, Lakeshore Grove underwent a transformation. The rehabilitated wetlands thrived once more, with water levels returning to normal. Biologists from my department visited regularly to monitor progress, advising the community on how to maintain the area's ecological balance. The local boardwalk was repaired, interpretive signs placed to educate visitors on the wetland's flora and fauna. A sense of unity blossomed among residents who once took the wetland for granted. Now they appreciated the wildlife, the subtle beauty of marsh reeds swaying in the breeze. Kids came on field trips to see the ecosystem up close, learning about aquatic life cycles and the importance of wetlands. Ms. Temple led weekend nature walks, while Ms. Parker crocheted small amphibian plushies to raise funds for ongoing conservation efforts. The HOA leadership changed hands to a more moderate, inclusive group determined to avoid another fiasco. They introduced transparent processes for any major proposals, ensuring the community's input and adherence to local and state laws. Freed from Karen's fixation on real estate gains, Lakeshore Grove discovered a deeper sense of stewardship for nature. The local press ran follow-up stories praising the successful restoration, labeling it a testament to the power of community and the rule of law. I gave a single interview as the chief of wildlife conservation, commending the neighbors for rallying behind the environment. The once negative headlines about HOA official drains wetlands had transformed into uplifting coverage of neighborhood revives habitat with official support. For me, the fiasco had an unexpected silver lining. Usually I dealt with big conservation crises from a distance, stepping in as a roving official. This time, the problem was right at home, forcing me to merge my personal life with my professional mission. Though it caused stress, it also let me see the immediate, tangible impact of our laws, how they protect even small pockets of wildlife in suburban sprawl. The success of the restoration underscored why I champion these regulations, to curb individuals like Karen from wantonly destroying nature. Neighbors who once only knew me as the newcomer on Mapleview Lane discovered that I was a top state official in wildlife. Some teased that if they'd known, they might have approached me sooner when concerns first arose. Others apologized for not standing up more vigorously against Karen's initial push. But no grudges lingered. The fiasco taught us all how swiftly a single determined official can cause havoc if unchallenged. Meanwhile, I found Lakeshore Grove a more welcoming place now, forging deeper connections with neighbors who share a newfound pride in the wetland preserve. Ms. Temple especially became a close friend, frequently collaborating with me on small environmental education projects. The once isolated preserve now bustled with life and attention, ironically thanks to Karen's misguided attempt to eradicate it. A year after the fiasco, Lakeshore Grove held an inaugural wetland appreciation festival near the reflooded marsh. Colorful booths showcased local crafts. Environmental organizations set up educational stations, and children displayed drawings of frogs and herons. The highlight was a short ceremony unveiling a plaque that read, "Restored through community resolve, protecting our natural heritage." Families strolled the boardwalk, snapping photos of egrets wading in calm waters. Volunteers served refreshments, donating proceeds to a wetland conservation fund. I gave a brief speech, praising the neighbors for uniting to defend these vital ecosystems. Ms. Parker and Ms. Temple cut a ribbon, symbolizing the official reopening of the boardwalk. Applause followed, cameras flashed. The atmosphere was joyous, filled with the sweet hum of cicadas and birds in the background, nature's triumphant soundtrack. In private moments, I recalled the heartbreak of seeing that drained, muddy ground and frantic wildlife. Now, seeing it teeming with vibrant life, I felt a sense of accomplishment that overshadowed all the strife Karen caused. Her brazen attempt to exploit the wetlands ironically led to a deeper local understanding of their value. People who once dismissed them as useless swamps now advocated for them passionately. The fiasco's final legacy was a heightened sense of ecological awareness. Though physically absent, Karen lingered in local lore. Occasionally, a newcomer would ask, "Is it true an HOA official tried to bulldoze the wetlands for a mall?" The old-timers would confirm the tale, shaking heads at how one person nearly wrought ecological disaster. A few cynics speculated she might attempt such stunts elsewhere. If so, they reasoned, her felony record for environmental violations, plus the fines, would hamper any new illusions of grandeur. She left behind a cautionary example of what can happen when personal greed collides with community and conservation laws. No one in Lakeshore Grove missed her heavy-handed rule. Freed from her negativity, the HOA functioned as a normal administrative body, overseeing landscaping, handling minor disputes, scheduling social events. They recognized the wetlands as an asset, not something to bury. The fiasco's memory served as an institutional check, a reminder that any big changes should be done transparently, with resident consensus and legal compliance. In the months following the Wetlands Festival, deeper environmental consciousness spread across Lakeshore Grove. Some homeowners planted native species in their yards to support local pollinators. A few installed small rain gardens to help manage stormwater, preventing runoff into the wetland. The board implemented a new rule requiring any major landscaping near the preserve to consult a local ecologist. All these positive changes stemmed from the crisis Karen provoked. The local council also recognized the wetlands' newly recognized significance. They occasionally directed small grants to maintain interpretive signs or host educational workshops. School groups visited, letting children see real examples of amphibians and aquatic plants. The synergy between the community, local governance, and my own department was heartening. This was how conservation ideally worked, bridging official enforcement with grassroots appreciation. For me, each day, I opened my curtains to the sight of that same wetland alive with bird calls. I felt the intangible reward of having safeguarded a piece of nature. I built stronger personal ties with neighbors who once were just polite acquaintances. We discuss water levels, monitor sightings of rare herons, or celebrate the arrival of seasonal migratory ducks. It made me appreciate how every patch of wild, even in suburban sprawl, can serve as a vital refuge if only we protect it. Reflecting on how it all began, I recall stepping into Hawthorne Estates believing it was just another suburban community with mild HOA rules. Instead, I found myself locked in a pitched battle with an HOA Karen who threatened to destroy a centuries-old wetland. Her ignorance of environmental law, combined with her arrogance, led to a dramatic confrontation that shaped the entire neighborhood's future. Ultimately, that confrontation ended with the wetlands rescue, Karen's downfall, and a revitalized sense of environmental stewardship among residents. The fiasco reminded me that no place is too small or too mundane to harbor ecological treasures worthy of saving, and that the law, when wielded ethically, can protect vulnerable habitats from unscrupulous or ill-informed individuals. The final outcome was, ironically, a far stronger synergy between the community and the local environment than existed before Karen tried to sabotage it. I remain in Lakeshore Grove, continuing my official duties, traveling across the state to evaluate other threatened sites. Yet returning home each evening to a once endangered but now thriving wetland is a humbling testament to the power of dedicated local action. Even an HOA can become a force for good, provided it values shared heritage over short-term profit. 6 months after the festival, Ms. Temple and Ms. Parker, along with the reformed HOA board, organized a gathering of thanks by the wetlands at sunset. Neighbors strolled over with chairs and blankets. Some brought small lanterns that reflected off the water surface. A circle formed near the newly regrown reeds as frogs croaked in the warm dusk. One by one, residents spoke briefly. Ms. Parker recounted how the fiasco made her realize the wetlands were more precious than she'd ever grasped. A father of 2 said it taught him about activism. He was previously apathetic, but now he saw how local voices matter. Ms. Temple described the joy of seeing wildlife return, the sense of giving nature a second chance. They all thanked me for stepping in with legal expertise, though I insisted the real heroes were all of them, who refused to let the sabotage proceed quietly. As darkness fully enveloped, we lit the lanterns, placing them along the boardwalk's edges. Their gentle glow illuminated the water surface, revealing small fish darting in the shallows. The moment felt sacred, a communal vow never again to let ignorance or greed threaten what belonged to both nature and the neighborhood. In that silent reflection, I felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, as though I, too, had found a true home in the wetland's gentle embrace. Today, Lakeshore Grove thrives as an exemplary suburban community that overcame a catastrophic attempt to destroy its prized wetland. The fiasco, engineered by an HOA Karen named Marcia Arnetti, ranged from hush-hush draining operations to open defiance of environmental laws, all for personal real estate ambitions. She never suspected her new neighbor, me, Beatrice Whitfield, was the chief of wildlife conservation, armed with the authority and knowledge to stop her plan in its tracks. The final outcome? The wetlands stand protected by official state order, gradually healing after the partial drainage. Karen faced hefty fines, public disgrace, and was removed from her HOA role. Freed from her toxic influence, the neighborhood coalesced around the preserve, forging a deeper environmental consciousness. Families, once indifferent, now champion its biodiversity, organizing events and educational programs. Gone is Karen's misguided quest for a commercial complex, replaced by a renewed appreciation for the wildlife that shares our corner of the earth. For me, the saga was a powerful reminder that even small pockets of nature deserve vigilant protection. A single individual with the wrong motives can do enormous damage if left unchecked. Yet a united community, backed by strong legal frameworks and unwavering moral conviction, can overcome any sabotage. Best of all, the fiasco ended in a happy resolution. The wetland restored, neighbors unified, the destructive official dethroned, and the spirit of conservation triumphing in a quiet suburban corner that, once threatened, now glistens under the golden sunrise, teeming with life.